Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to the Explorer. Again, I appreciate your time. You all allow what you're supposed to be doing and to spend a few time with us. I salute you all as always. We are at a crossroad at the moment as a continent, and it's important for us to continue to look at the reason why. This democratical issue that's going on across the board, it's being observed globally at the moment. We've seen a number of things happening in the continent at the moment, and the geopolitical partners are watching very closely. So I have a very big question to look at, because this issue of the democracy in the region, the question here is democracy still a governance model or something that African countries should embrace, or there is an alternative method that needs to be employed? Because we've seen even the most democratic nation in the continent of Africa has experienced difficulties in a number of areas. And African countries are going through a challenging period at the moment, looking at post-COVID-19. And more importantly, we have some nations that have failed to deliver for their nationals and their citizens. We have millions of students coming out from the universities across the continent of Africa. We've seen democracy being challenged across the region. And most of these nations are some that are very close to some geopolitical partners who have their own interest in the region. Make no mistake, the pressure is mounting, whether it's across the Sahel at the moment or consider across the Sudan. But more importantly, if you look at the situation that's happening at the moment in the country of Tanzania in particular.
Now, 5 days after the disputed election sparked deadly protests and allegations of mass killings, heavy police presence remains a key feature in major cities. The internet remains shut down and the death toll remains sharply disputed. NTV senior reporter Catherine Omwando reports that the communication from the relevant authorities remains on mute, including Kenya's government, on the fate of its people in the neighboring and troubled Tanzania.
It raised the question if the continent is ready to use this model of so-called democracy. Some experts would argue it's an imported model of governance. Others will say it has worked in some nations. We've had countries that presidents have been there for decades. They have delivered successfully to their people. You cannot satisfy everyone. But again, some countries have wholeheartedly, intentionally allowed some cronies to rule the nations for decades and cannot deliver. So the big question here is, what kind of model is this? Is this a model that's incorporated in colonialism, or is a model that these leaders cannot allow their citizens to speak? Even the most democratic country in the continent of Africa, considering countries like Ghana, who to an extent face some difficulties in a number of areas, it almost escalated. We saw what happened in the country of Senegal that went very close to the brink of catastrophe. And this whole thing is being observed very closely. And the situation now in Central Africa, in countries like Cameroon and the rest, and more importantly, the method that is being used by the security forces, especially in the country of Tanzania at the moment. Consider Tanzania's situation. It was once embraced as a model of democracy, a model of transition in the continent of Africa, but Tanzania has gone from grass to grass. How embarrassing is this at this particular time in Africa's history? It is important to note that what happens across the continent of Africa, because when the nationals have had this bent up anger, when the system is built for a few, like the president of Guinea once said, a model and a system that's built for a few people to benefit is never going to survive. I think that was a very big quote from that president from the country of Guinea. So I'm not saying that I have a crystal ball on how the countries across the region should run out or should manage their countries. But it comes at a time when you have young people, the so-called Gen Z, are currently asking questions if the current model is what works or does not work, or it's not working at all. Because students coming out on a daily basis from universities across the region, they are having a lot of challenges, no jobs. I'm not saying that our countries in Africa are facing the same difficulties, but I'm talking from the global perspective here.
Day 5 of crisis in Tanzania, the streets of major cities remain under heavy police presence, with citizens now required to carry national identification cards for random checks. The situation on the ground is mixed. While some parts of Dar es Salaam are reportedly returning to normalcy, tension remains high in other areas. According to NTV sources, the airport is now in full operation, with flights coming in and out, but no boats are headed to semi-autonomous Zanzibar, creating limited food supply for residents there.
So, African nations are facing this challenge. You know, we talk about Africa here as a single entity because we've been advocating that Africa should have a single voice in almost every step of its way in dealing with some unforgiving partners globally who have bent to meddle and in a number of areas to take their own interests first. So these nations across the continent having diverse culture, having diverse challenges, diverse difficulties, and they are facing a time in their history where countries have to choose what model is going to work. We've seen countries that have been run by leaders who've been there for quite some time, but they have delivered for their own people in a whole lot of areas, 60, 70%. We've seen others that have failed to recognize that the world has changed. And they continue to, with the new generation, the AIs of the world, the information superhighway, and most countries struggle to maintain order. According to them, this is order. No, the people are asking questions because if they go to the polls, if they see that the democratic system, the so-called democracy that I'm talking about, is not in their favor, does not meet their needs, they will ask questions. So if they go ahead to ask questions, and some of these governments' unruly behavior of some of security forces go out there and rough handle and beat and maim their own citizens, deployment of military in the streets. Some will argue that it's to bring stability and order. But again, you need to deliver for your people. You need to accept and move forward. If you cannot deliver for 4 years, 6 years, 7 years, whatever the term limits are, then it's about time to give it over. But again, this notion that the opposition parties cannot longer talk freely, cannot make their own choices, cannot argue. But again, that's where the question lies. So the democratic credentials of the continent of Africa, it's being questioned at the moment. And this is where the problem lies. So we do have some global partners who will come in after each time this happens. They kind of do some condemnation and they will talk about what's going on and just criticize, give out some kind of notes. International human rights organizations come and just speak and go. But the government still stay in place and they still keep failing the people. So the question here is, what is the right method? Leave me a comment in the comment section to let me know what you think and where Africa sits at the moment. So it's a big question. It's an unanswered question at this time. It is vitally important for the continent of Africa to note that there are particular steps that are being taken, especially for those who have experienced recent elections, the cutting of internet, subjugating your people, lambasting them back and forth, allowing the people not to even speak freely, shutting down the internet. I think this method of governance or this method of controlling your individuals, even the individuals or the countries that developed or that created the internet, who came out with this technology, they themselves are struggling to be able to control this particular medium. And I see African nations we saw what happened in the country of Gabon. That happened there. The situation in Madagascar is an example. So sometimes these leaders come in and they fail to recognize, they sit into these bubbles, and the bubble is bursting in a number of countries at the moment. So you can't just keep sitting there and fail to recognize that your citizens and nationals, they do have their individual potential. They have their own individual aspiration. They have their own, they are benchmarking your particular governance system. They are benchmarking your development and growth. They are observing what's happening. So especially the situation in Madagascar, when the president left the country and was aided by the country of France. That's what I'm saying here, that African countries haven't recognized that you should put your citizens first. Because we are at a crossroad as a continent, and the geopolitical partners, whether in North America, in the continent of Europe, Asian partners, China, Russia, Indians, and more importantly, Middle Eastern partners, emerging Turkey, all of these countries are observing closely. Are they perfect? Not at all. But again, if you feel that the democratic credentials or the model that has been handed to you during colonialism is not what is working, why don't you try other options? So, but again, trying other options here does not necessarily mean that you have to subjugate your people. You have to stop the freedom of speech. You have to maim. You have to detain. You have to drag. You have to use excessive force. So the question here is, where does this excessive force come? Is it kind of a colonial mentality that was handed over to some of these governments, that they have to manhandle their people, they have to shut down the internet, they have to prevent their nationals from expressing their own will? People are ambitious. This is the 21st century. A lot is going on globally, and they can observe what's happening. So if you can deliver for your people, if you cannot meet the expectation, if you cannot meet the basic economic fundamentals, if you cannot roll out a developmental plan, then you better step down and let someone else who is ambitious, who can take the country to a whole different step up to the plate and move forward. So we are experiencing a challenging period at the moment, and I feel that African geopolitical partners are observing, because a number of them do have businesses across the continent of Africa. They have billions of US dollars in investment, and they are observing it very closely. I saw that the foreign minister of the country of Tanzania. Remember Tanzania's situation when the former leader passed on. We heard the new leader that came in at the moment. Tanzania was hailed as the democracy in the continent of Africa. Everyone salute the country of Tanzania. What has happened in the past couple of years? Tanzania in the news at the moment for the wrong reason. It's amazing and challenging how, if you've tasted power, you fail to, if you are really like maiming your people, if you are treating your nationals the way you are, what do you expect your geopolitical partners, your citizens who are in these countries, if they fall in the trap of foreign governments, what do they have to do with them? So I think Tanzania's situation, I saw the Minister of Foreign Affairs, or the Foreign Minister, went on BBC and embarrassed himself there and disgraced the country of Tanzania. There's one thing to basically communicate, to do public relations, but there's another thing sometimes to acknowledge the damages, because you can't just come in and blame the global media at some point. They have their own fault. But the difficulties that are on the ground and the denial of the opposition to communicate, the use of the military, the use of the security forces in a disproportionate way, it makes our job difficult. It makes the conversation tough for us to communicate where the continent stands at the moment. In Gabon, it happened. The leader wanted to continue ruling. Some come and change the constitution over and over. We saw what happens in the country of Niger with Mohamed Bazoum, who was hailed by the United States of America as a model of democracy, but the president wanted to do what he wanted to do. And some of these partnerships are not going to be working because the democratic credentials, the democratic embodiment, what's in this particular model, it's been questioned in the continent of Africa at the moment. Is this the way the continent will realize its full growth and potential? Whether it is in Ghana, whether it is in Senegal, we saw what happened there, it escalated. Whether it is in the country of Madagascar, and you saw what France came in again and helped the leaders to escape the country. So sometimes it leaves Africans with a bitter taste on how they have to govern themselves, because the continent is facing tremendous difficulties and challenges at the moment from the point of getting the African voice out there. So by the country of Tanzania and a whole lot of other nations who are involved in this thing of saying that they are democratic nations, but are silencing the opposition and silencing the voice of their people and failing to meet the needs of their own particular nationals, citizens. If you do not listen to the young people who are the future of tomorrow, who are the ones who are going to lead the continent of Africa in the 21st century to bat through the challenges that are being faced globally, then you are not doing the right thing. So this aspect of democracy, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think, because if this is the model that we're going to be pushing forward, it's going to be a question. So I want to allow our geopolitical partners to observe that Africa is going through an incredible period at the moment, and we are hoping that things can work out, and more importantly, that peace to restore back to those countries. But there must be some kind of a dialogue on where things are moving. For those countries that nationals voted for particular people whom they feel that it's about time for them to move the country to the right direction, so be it. So Africa should sit up and start making some tough choices. I'll be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Smash the like button. We never edited this video. We basically bring to you what's happening, because the democratic credentials of Africans are being questioned at the moment globally. And if this is the right model for Africa to employ, and if these democratic issues have failed the continent of Africa so far. So I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day, and show the video some love, and I will catch you in our next episode. Bye-bye.